Back to the daily grind. Thanks for checking out the channel. Make sure to hit subscribe if you're new and hit thumbs up if you're not a baby back pickle biting bitch boy, cause you know what time it is. It's full time.
MMA.
It's happening. Holy smokes, the UFC got the job done. They must have paid Holly Holm what she was asking. Cris Cyborg vs. Holly Holm has officially been slated for UFC 219, most likely going to be the main event. If you looked at the UFC's Twitter when they announced this fight, they were super excited just to get a title fight. They were like, there's going to be a title fight at UFC 219. Holly Holm vs. Cris Cyborg is official. So with that being said, I mean, I was listening to the MMA Beat, I believe at work today, and they were talking about how there might not be a title fight at UFC 219. If the Tyron Woodley versus Nate Diaz fight doesn't materialize, then the main event could be like Khabib versus Barboza or something, because the Conor McGregor situation, he can't main event it. If Nate Diaz doesn't sign the deal with Tyron Woodley, he's not going to be on the card, which is kind of bullshit to me, because if you'll take a fight with Nate Diaz at 219, you better take that fucking fight with Colby Covington. Everybody wants to see you put those hands on Colby Covington at this point. So if you're gonna take a fight at UFC 219 versus Nate, if Nate's not gonna sign the contract, aren't you still ready to fight? Because I mean, I cannot wait for Cris Cyborg versus Holly Holm, but the UFC has spoiled us a little bit recently with like these 3 title fight cards. So for UFC 219, which we were expecting to be one of the biggest cards of the year, to only have 1 title fight, I mean, and the card has already taken some hits with Dominic Cruz had to pull out of his fight versus Jimmy Rivera, and Jimmy Rivera is yet to find another opponent. Now, John Lineker and some other bantamweight contenders have said they would take the fight, but Jimmy Rivera revealed on the MMA Hour he kind of only wants TJ, even though TJ is going to be fighting DJ. It didn't sound like Jimmy Rivera is really willing to take on a short notice opponent, aside from Dominic Cruz. So the card's taking some hits, and then also on top of that, I mean, as I said, I really love this Cyborg Holly Holm fight. This is actually the biggest fight possible between in WMMA and women's MMA. These are the 2 biggest active UFC stars, with Ronda Rousey and Miesha Tate out, and Amanda Nunes, who doesn't have the popularity yet of a Holly Holm or Cris Cyborg. These are the 2 biggest stars of WMMA coming and clashing at UFC for the women's featherweight title. Now, some people, talk about the fact that Cris Cyborg, they're still not a 145-pound division, and Cris Cyborg is fighting a lot of bantamweights that are stepping up. Well, the thing about Holly Holm is, even though she's fought at bantamweight, she also fought for the inaugural featherweight title versus Germaine de Randamie. Now, she lost that fight, which was somewhat controversial. There were those strikes after the bell and shit. Some people thought that maybe a point should have been taken away from GDR, and maybe the belt should have went Holly Holm's way, especially considering when it was time to fight Cyborg for the belt, GDR, ended up just vacating instead of fighting Cyborg. So, with that being said, Holly Holm has actually been a legitimate 145-pound title contender technically. Now she's going to be stepping up to fight Cris Cyborg, and I think this matchup is one of the, to me personally, this is one of my favorite matchups for Cris Cyborg, because Cris Cyborg seems like she's just going to roll through everybody else, but I just feel like with Holly Holm's counter-striking style, she's got that chance, you know what I'm saying? She's got the Anderson Silva, the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, if you rush in, you can get clipped up. Don't be mistaken. She can catch Cris Cyborg coming in, and Cris Cyborg being, the monster, you just expect her to come in and put the pressure on Holly Holm and not be scared of Holly Holm's tactics, not play the Tyron Woodley versus Stephen Wonderboy Thompson where she's like, oh, I'm not playing your game, it's going to be a boring fight. Cris Cyborg, I see her going in there and trying to dominate and let the world know, who she is, because Cris Cyborg, I believe, only has 1 year left on her UFC contract, and if she dominates here, maybe the UFC builds the 145-pound division, or not. Maybe she moves to boxing, but this is still going to be a big fight. One of the bummers about this, though, is the UFC have already got my hopes up with Nate Diaz and Tyron Woodley. So if you're going to tell me now that neither one of them are going to be on the card, that's going to be like, what? First of all, Conor and Tony Ferguson aren't going to be on the card. So you mean to tell me with Conor out, you can't slide Nate Diaz in right there versus Tony Ferguson. So we're not going to have Tony Ferguson, Nate Diaz, Tyron Woodley, possibly Jimmy Rivera, or Conor McGregor on this card. Or Dominic Cruz, and we were supposed to have potentially, any of them, a number of those fighters. So now it went from, to me, being one of the biggest, baddest, best cards of the year to just a really good pay-per-view, a solid pay-per-view. I mean, we still got Khabib versus Edson and Cyborg versus Holm, which makes it a solid pay-per-view. But aside from Khabib and Cris Cyborg and Holly Holm, the casual fans, I don't know how much they're gonna care about this card. You know, I do believe this card will probably do, like, you know, in the 500,000 range. I mean, and that's a dumbass predicting just from what, you know, what I listen to, you know, and the little bit of MMA knowledge that I have on pay-per-view numbers and shit. But I mean, think about it. We potentially could have had Conor McGregor. Even without him, we could have had Nate Diaz. Even without him, we could have had Tyron Woodley. All of them would have added to the pay-per-view buys. I mean, so for us to not get any of them, that's got to take away from the expected pay-per-view buys. And I really don't know, you know, Cris Cyborg. How is Cris Cyborg, Holly Holm gonna do on their own? I don't know how Khabib's fan base is with the pay-per-views. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know, man. Hopefully, I hope this isn't it. Now, if it is, I'm still gonna tune in. It's still worth the money. But with all of these talks of, you know, why wouldn't we get Tony Ferguson versus Nate Diaz? What's wrong with Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington? How are you too injured to fight, you know, Colby Covington, but you're not too injured to fight Nate Diaz? I mean, Tyron Woodley was talking about his injury and possibly being out for a while, and it's like, as soon as he got win, oh, I might be able to fight Nate Diaz. Let me shake this fucking injury out. Well, nigga, you better keep shaking. I want to see, everybody wants to see Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington at this point. If you know what I'm saying, because he's not going to face any suspensions or sanctions for what happened versus Fabricio Verdum in Sydney, because Fabricio chucked that boomerang or the Werdoomerang at him. He backed away, walked away. You know, he didn't want any smoke, and he's pressing charges. So as much of a pussy as he might look like to a lot of people for pressing charges and backing away from Fabricio Verdum, he still would be available to fight on fucking December 30th. I guarantee you Colby Covington would take the fight. I mean, that's what he's been doing all this talking for. So if Tyron Woodley says, hey, if you want this fucking title shot, fight me December 30th. Nate Diaz is scared, so now Colby Covington, you're the only other option. Colby's gotta say yes. So what, does Tyron Woodley not want any smoke with Colby? I mean, I don't know. I'm still excited about this Cris Cyborg versus Holly Holm fight. I just hope that we can get another big fight on UFC 219, or else it's kind of like the UFC hit us with like a flat tire. It's like, yeah, we love this fight, but you just teased us with Nate Diaz, you teased us with Tyron Woodley, you teased us with Conor McGregor, you teased us with Tony Ferguson, and you're telling me we don't get none of those? I mean, you didn't tease us with Dominic Cruz versus Jimmy Rivera, but we're losing that fight. So, it is what it is, man. This is a big fight. I'm glad they got it done. You know, the UFC, you could tell they were getting desperate for the fact that they went to Nate Diaz, and now they had to, you know, Holly Holm versus Cris Cyborg was dead, according to Holly Holm's managers. But, and that's what Ariel had wanted to say on the MMA Hour, you know, I don't know if it was Holly Holm's manager, someone on Holly Holm's team said the fight was dead. So and it was over financial issues. So they must have said, all right, man, or all right, chick, take this fucking $1 million. You know what? I hope Cris Cyborg whoops your ass. You know, they didn't say that out loud, but they're like, you know what? We're going to pay her. But it is what it is, man. Let the full-time family know what the fuck you think about this fight in the comments. And UFC 219 as a whole now. Does this fill the void for you? I don't know. I'm out.
Da 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 da. It's the motherfucking DOWG.